Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have the VIVO Y36 with me and we're going to do a full review. Let's get started. This device is part of the mid-range. In Mexico, its launch price has been 5,499 Mexican pesos. That's approximately $320, although remember that the prices here are not what they are over there. If you are from another country, you will probably feel that the prices in Mexico are quite high, although it is not in all cases, but this device is definitely not going to be characterized by having a very tight price. However, Vivo offers interesting things in Mexico as 2 years warranty, which is something that few manufacturers offer, and also offer you insurance against theft or accidental damage, although this insurance only applies when you buy it with some distributors. If you are going to buy it, I encourage you to ask if they include that insurance or not. Definitely, these last 2 points could be its most attractive points because in the rest of the features it is possibly below its competitors. But anyway, what do you think if you join me to know it point by point? Let's start with the front design where we will not find any special glass. So, it is strange that we do not have Gorilla Glass, although in the case of Vivo, they usually use more crystals called Scott Sensation Up. But in this model specifically, they do not have any special glass to protect the screen, so this could be considered a weak point. The screen occupies a good part of the front, although the lower bezel is the one that is slightly larger, but I think the design does go according to its price. On the right side, we have the power button that is also a fingerprint reader in addition to the volume buttons. On the top is a microphone and the tray where we can place the nano SIM card. And in addition to a nano SIM card, you can place a micro SD card up to 1 terabyte. As we all know, there are other regions where the dual SIM version will also be available, but in Mexico, this is not the case. The left side is completely clean, but it serves to give us a glimpse of this plastic frame with metallic look. And finally, at the bottom, we find the headphone jack, also another microphone, USB port, and finally, the only speaker that this device has. Its thickness is 8.07 millimeters, so I think it has a good design, and it weighs 202 grams. So it's not characterized as being ultra light. And as you notice, in this case, the back cover that I have is in teal color, but it's also available in a Meteor Black edition. But this teal edition has some visual texture to it, although it's not a texture that you can feel to the touch. And one little detail that might be hard to notice is a multicolored outline that has been added to the camera module to add a nice touch to the design. It is definitely a nice cell phone that's additionally IP54 certified. Not to be confused with the IP68 certification, as this certification it incorporates means it can withstand splashes. It can't be submerged, so you have to be careful anyway, but it's appreciated to have this level of certification on a device of this price. This screen is 6.64 inches with a 19.5:9 ratio approximately, although it is a bit odd that it has a few pixels too many on top. Specifically, its resolution is 1080 by 2338, so the resolution remains at Full HD+, offering us a good level of detail. In this sense, I think the screen does offer a good experience, although the technology is LCD. However, I think it is one of the best LCDs I have seen lately in this range, as they usually have much paler colors. But in this case, I feel that it does have good colors, even in the yellow tone that usually complicates this type of screens. So I really like the experience, although obviously if you find any other device with AMOLED screen, you will surely consider it to be of better quality, since in this case the viewing angles are not so excellent. Notice how it loses considerable brightness when viewing content from the side. This screen has 90 Hz in its refresh rate, so animations could be shown considerably fluid. Although I must say that the animation to go to the home screen and also to open multitasking can become a bit slow, especially in reaction. So overall, I think it doesn't feel like an ultra fluid device, but the screen does have good quality. The maximum brightness is considerably good for a device in this range, although remember that the best viewing will be from the front, as if you turn the device a bit, the brightness will be lost quite a bit. On the other hand, the minimum brightness also seems to be low enough for comfortable use at night. It obviously incorporates other basic functions such as the eye shield, which is a small filter. It also has the dark mode and it has several screen calibrations that you can use for color rendering. So we have the professional mode, a clear mode, and specifically we can adjust the colors to our liking. Although from the standard mode, I think you have a good level of display. And by the way, I forgot to tell you that the display is capable of adapting its refresh rate between 60 and 90 Hz to adjust its power consumption. I had already anticipated that it only has one speaker, so we are dealing with a mono sound. And in fact, the sound is simple. What is remarkable is the volume, as it also has an additional gain mode. So it shows 150 and 200% volume when modifying the sound, but the bass frequencies do not stand out enough. Fortunately, the sound does not reach saturation, but definitely among its competitors there will be better exponents in sound. Let's listen to a small test, although remember that it is not the same to listen to it live. From my perspective, the mids stand out too much over other frequencies and that could become a bit annoying. In addition to the fact that it does not have any equalizer to modify that sound. What we will find is an audio boost option, which is what I mentioned a moment ago, to get up to 200% volume. And it also has some additional options such as super audio resolution, which supposedly will improve the definition of the sound, but honestly I do not notice too much difference. Plus, you can customize the experience a bit depending on how you hear the sound. It also has a feature called Super Audio, which is more or less like Dolby Atmos but will work only with headphones. And finally, you have an audio redirection feature, which can come in handy when you have your cell phone connected to a speaker. So some apps will play on the cell phone and other apps will play on the speaker for a better experience. And this is something that I had only seen in Samsung devices so far. So I highlight that it is also available in this Vivo device. I remind you that it does have a headphone jack, but if you want to use wireless headphones, we have good news. In addition to the SBC and AAC codecs, it also supports the aptX adaptive codec, so you can have good resolution audio with headphones that have support for this codec as well. Next, let's listen to a test of these two microphones it has built in.
Esta es una prueba de los micrófonos de este VIVO Y36, un dispositivo de gama media.
It's in the, as it seems to capture audio well enough, although it's obviously not studio quality or anything like that. Next, let's listen to what it would sound like more or less at a concert stapling music at a very high volume. Fortunately, it seems that the microphones don't quite saturate, even at very high volumes. The front camera is a 6-megapixel camera with f-aperture 2.45 and fixed focus. By default, there is no way to speed enter the camera, although through the settings you can select that by holding down the volume down button when the screen is off. You can quickly enter this section. The capture speed seems to be good enough, although not as fast when you are taking multiple pictures, and note that on the front camera, burst is not available. In the bottom right corner, we are going to find a button available to access some filters that we can't preview in real time. There will also be the light effects section that will be able to illuminate your face in different ways. This is a feature that I haven't seen available on other devices, so it may come to stand out as a highlight. The results of this front-facing camera look good, although I don't know if it's in line with the price. As you notice, it does have a good level of detail, but from this picture, we start to appreciate a bit of noise and some overexposed areas. Also, it is not a very wide camera and has fixed focus, although fortunately when you have your arm stretched out, it still comes out well focused in the result. In backlit shots, it does have a good balance of light and shadow, although you had already seen in the first picture that in some scenarios, some areas can be overexposed. Indoors, with much less lighting, there will also be a bit of graininess, although fortunately it maintains the level of detail well and above all the color saturation, which is what could matter a lot more in this type of photography. At night, if you have a good light source, you will also have a very similar result to what we saw indoors. That is, it does show a bit of graininess and and a bit of noise in the darker areas, but it maintains color saturation well. And finally, it is able to take portrait photos with the front camera, but the result is very simple as it does not detect objects and can also overexpose some areas when you are in backlit scenarios. On the back, we will find the 26 megapixel main camera that is slightly closer than most smartphones. It offers us a resolution of 50 megapixels with f1.8 aperture and autofocus. The other two cameras, I would consider them to be ornamental. One is supposed to be a macro camera and the other is for depth detection. Both are 2 megapixels with f2.4 aperture. Obviously, from the automatic mode, the pictures will not come out 50 megapixels but 12 megapixels. If you want 50 megapixel photos, you have to go to more to select the specific mode. But obviously, the optimized experience is in auto mode, where notice that if we hold down the shutter, we can take a burst of up to 20 pictures, which is not the fastest we've seen, but at least it's available. Next, we'll try to capture number 1 to see how fast this camera's shutter speed can be. Let's give it a second try to be absolutely sure. Next, let's review the results. The capture is too fast as I even consider it to have a pre-buffer as the picture seems to have been captured before I got to the moment when I tried to press the button, and the same thing happened in both results. So it seems to have a fairly snappy capture, and that undoubtedly can be a strength. Again, in the bottom right corner, we have access to the filters that I mentioned to you on the front camera, and at the top we also have access to HDR, which by default comes on automatic, and also access to super macro mode. As part of the manual controls in auto mode, we simply have focus and exposure. But if we go to the list of more modes, we can also access the professional mode where we can regulate the exposure compensation. Also the ISO, which can go up to 3200, as well as the shutter speed, which can go up to 32 seconds, and other things like white balance, focus, and remember that it does allow us to take pictures in RAW for more advanced post-processing. So we do have some professional features in this Pro mode. And as for the smart capture, notice how when you're focusing on a document, it immediately suggests you to enter this special document mode where perfectly the device will be able to crop that sheet. And notice how you can also generate a PDF quite easily or a PowerPoint presentation as well. So this comes in handy for school or office. Although QR codes, it is not able to recognize them from the main interface, but it does have a shortcut to Google Lens in the top left corner. And through this tool, you can indeed perform QR code scanning. The device does allow you to capture photos with 50 megapixel resolution, but honestly, it's not going to be a very attractive result, especially since the lens quality isn't even very good. So there are some areas that are out of focus and you can't really see that 50 megapixel level of detail in the picture either, even though the resolution is 50 megapixels. And in action photography, as I had already shown you, it is curious that it apparently has a buffer to capture moments before the instant you press the shutter. In this case, the shutter was pressed just as the person was in the center, but as you can see, the result actually came out earlier. Honestly, the pictures are poor for the price of this device. Consider how it comes out an out of focus area, little level of detail. The colors are possibly the only thing we could rescue, although they are still sometimes a little pale colors. So honestly, I did not like the result. Curiously, in interiors where there is not too much illumination, the result seems to be better. So possibly outdoor photos may have some hope through some software update, but we don't know if they are going to send it. In backlit situations, note how it manages to balance well the areas that were very brightly lit, but the darker area might still need a bit more lighting, so the result is average. In the evenings, again, we will notice a plain result. Fortunately, it seems to balance light and shadow well in this result, where there is still a bit of artificial light presence and there doesn't seem to be significant noise presence. And in a photograph of the darker area using the night mode, notice that the result is positive, albeit with a bit of graininess, but in the price range, I think the night photographs did please me. Regarding the zoom, the device suggests only 2x as a quick shortcut, which suggests that it could maintain optical quality, but in reality it is not. From the 2x zoom, we realize that it is a fairly simple zoom. It allows us to get up to 10x, but it is really a very poor quality picture. So consider that this device has no zoom at all, definitely one of its weakest points. For macro photography, this is as close as you can get to small objects and generates a good blur effect in the background. Plus, it does have a good level of detail and good color saturation in the foreground, although the focus may not be very even if you are very close to the objects. For more even focus, you could use the super macro camera, although it also doesn't allow you to get too close to the subjects and generates a lot more noise, although fortunately it maintains color saturation well. So the macro camera I think is average. I remind you that this device does not incorporate an ultra-wide camera, but you can use the panoramic mode instead, and I think you can indeed achieve a good picture with good amplitude, good color saturation, and overall a good level of detail. Lastly, the portrait mode seems to not have a very good detection capability because despite having a specific camera for depth detection, in reality some areas do come out of focus and others don't. So it's definitely not a camera I'm going to recommend for taking portrait pictures. In fact, this would be another of its weaknesses. Video recording will be simple, although we honestly wouldn't expect higher quality in this price range. That is, it allows us to record in full HD at 30 frames per second with both cameras, and in the case of 60 frames per second, it is only available in HD resolution and only with the rear camera. The remarkable thing is that when recording, it has these color filters that you can also apply, and it also has some beauty effects on the video recording, although when applying any beauty effect, the video resolution drops to HD only. So it might not be that useful in practical life. When recording a video, we will be able to turn on the flashlight without the need to stop our recording. We can also take a picture while we are recording. We have a slider for zooming without quick shortcuts, and we also have a button to pause and resume our recording. What we don't have is a button to rotate to the front camera, although that would be a lot to ask for a device of this price. The video recording results are very plain because the color is inaccurate in general, both in photography and in this case. Slightly paler colors are felt, little contrast, though that's something one might expect in a device of this price. Not a very remarkable video. Indoors, it again maintains slightly paler colors than we would like and starts to look a bit more noisy. In addition to that, we notice that the focus starts to struggle a bit more and sometimes remains misaligned. In backlit scenes, it will try to light the face well, and so it's going to sacrifice some areas in the back, overexposing them a bit. Although it seems to me that the balance he's trying to make is good enough. At night, there will be much more noise present, so it is not very advisable to record using this device, as the white balance can change abruptly. And when lights appear in the scene, it could also abruptly change the exposure, and in darker areas it is not able to recover much information. So it doesn't perform well recording at night, although this was a bit more to be expected in this price range. Fortunately, it does have digital stabilization, so when walking, it can somewhat avoid simple vibrations. But if you're running, it's obviously not going to be enough to have a much more stable video, since it also doesn't have a special stabilization mode for action scenes, but it is noteworthy that at least it does have digital stabilization for basic movements. The fast motion mode has no stabilization and can go from 15x, which might still be too fast for some movements of people, but can reach up to 960x to record perfectly well impressive landscapes or even in a simple way the growth of a plant. On the other hand, slow motion is also quite simple with a low resolution and only at 120 frames per second, in addition to the fact that it can go out of focus while you are recording, so the result is definitely very simple. And as I mentioned, this camera can suffer a lot when trying to focus, as sometimes the focus may become fixed without responding very quickly, but in better defined lines could have a better reaction. The front camera is going to have a simple quality in video recording. Again, as with photography, there could be some overexposed areas if you're recording mainly in the shadows. It does maintain a good level of detail though, but unfortunately it doesn't have stabilization. So when walking around, it could generate annoying vibrations, although curiously it allows you to zoom in and out. This could help some people who want to focus on some details of the face. That is a very uncommon tool, so it could be considered a strong point. Though remember, they have a fixed focus camera like pretty much all mid-range, so you wouldn't be able to zoom in on some object to show it off, and in backlit scenes it definitely won't perform well because it will prioritize lighting the face well, completely sacrificing the backlit areas. Indoors, it maintains good color saturation, and I even think it keeps noise control well, although again, it will give priority to illuminating the face, so we might see some aggressive jumps in lighting at times, and again, it's noticeable that it doesn't have any stabilization. And at night, the video drops down to 17 frames per second to try to light better, so motion feels a little weird. Although fortunately it has a good control on noise, as even in the darkest areas you get to distinguish only if there is a little more aggressive movement, but I actually think it maintains a good performance for recording at night if you don't care that the video doesn't look very fluid. But honestly, if you're interested in high quality video, you're not really going to find it here. You'll only find well lit videos, but they don't feel like they have very smooth motion. And it has few front-facing video options as it offers neither slow motion nor fast motion with this camera, let alone has a dual view feature. This cell phone comes with Android 13 and Phone Touch OS 13 as its operating system, so it doesn't come fully updated from the factory, but you should know that it does have a good update policy. And the truth is that I have had a good experience with it. In fact, as you notice, it is currently receiving a new update with a new security patch, as the manufacturer has promised 3 years of monthly security patches. This is remarkable because there are other manufacturers that release their security patches on a bi-monthly basis and also promised you 2 years of software updates, so you will be getting Android 14 and Android 15. That's something few devices at this price point can boast, so it's easily one of its strongest points. As part of the added software, we have the possibility to change different animations of the whole system. We can even change the speed of some animations, so the customization is extended in this aspect. Also, the animations at the time of performing the facial unlock or also at the time of charging the cell phone. So, you can choose the animation that you like the most, even to be displayed differently when connecting a USB cable. It also has different gestures that we can perform to use this device, such as sliding 3 fingers down to enable super capture mode, through which we will make a screenshot that can be extended and more. We can also swipe 3 fingers up if we want to split the screen, but that will only work with some supported apps. Notice how it would allow us to open 2 apps at the same time without much of a problem, so I think it's a considerably nice feature. Also, the apps stay together in the recent apps panel, and notice how it also features the floating window mode. Although it's not so easy to open an app in this mode, but you would have the capabilities to move it wherever you want and also minimize it. So that's pretty cool. In fact, you can also resize it, although as you may realize, YouTube is not available in this special format. Interestingly, it also has a beauty mode for video calls compatible with WhatsApp. Notice how when entering a video call, we will have this button that will allow us to modify the intensity of the beauty of our face. We can have a parameter of up to 100%, so I think it comes in quite handy. The blurring of the skin is very similar to what we see when we take selfies, and this is a feature that few manufacturers offer today. In the photo gallery, we will also find an interesting object eraser that is going to work considerably well. Obviously, it is not with an ultra-advanced artificial intelligence, but you can select what you want to erase and it will automatically fill it considering the content that is around it. Obviously, much more complex things to delete. Maybe it's not going to do it with 100% accuracy, but believe me, it works considerably well, and it's a feature that's already included and you don't need to pay for it. Look at the result. I insist that it is not 100% accurate, but it is really quite good. Inside the gallery, you will also find a tool to compress videos in case you want to save some storage. You can select what resolution you want the resulting video to have, so it's also a very handy tool. And finally, I want to show you the Nano Music player that you have in this corner as a kind of widget, but it allows you to play music with both the native app and Spotify. So it's interesting just to have a control of your music directly on the home screen. This device has an Attic motor on the Z-axis, so the vibration doesn't feel as advanced as on other devices, although in this price range it's something more or less common to see. Overall, we could say that this device has a system without too many modifications, so it maintains a stable experience. Although in the case of Mexico, it may arrive with a lot of bloatware. Note how many additional applications I have installed. All of these games I did not install, they were automatically installed when I set up the device. Fortunately, it does allow us to uninstall all this junk content, but it might be a bit annoying for some people. Overall, the feel of the system is good, albeit without too many added options. The side fingerprint reader that it has supports up to 5 registrations and its unlocking is considerably fast, and in addition to the fingerprint reader, it has facial recognition, although it's only 2-dimensional, so it's not the most secure thing you'll find. It also has Google Smart Lock, which will allow us to configure some secure environments such as a location or a connected Bluetooth device so that in those environments the device does not show the lock screen. However, it does not have a secure folder except for the secure folder that comes with Google Files. But remember that in this secure folder we will not be able to use the fingerprint reader but only a pin or pattern. It also does not have a child mode, but it does include an application lock mode that is present within the iManager application. So you can perfectly select which applications you want to request your fingerprint before you can enter them for more privacy or greater security. In fact, within the iManager application, you will also find the security scanner that will search for malware in collaboration with Avast, so you have a good suite of protection. In this same application, you will also find an application cloner in case you want to use 2 instances of the same application without the need to have 2 cell phones. And something that caught my attention is that it also has an application isolation. So you can add some apps that you want to run in a completely secure environment without access to the rest of your data. This is a feature that I haven't seen so far on other devices. And finally, like pretty much all of Android, it has Google support for the password manager. So you can remember all your passwords, but it automatically fills them in without first verifying that it is indeed you. So it is advisable to access the Google settings to enable this option, and passwords are not filled automatically, but first make a fingerprint verification before filling. And another thing that Google adds would be the function to find my device in case you get to lose it, although it is not so advanced. Like all Android, it also has the digital wellness features, so you can check all the time you consume on different apps, and it has the emergency mode by pressing 5 times on the power button to call quickly. The battery is 5000 milliamps and gives us a good battery life, although it could be close to the average of other mobile devices. I did 2 tests running this power drainer, first in the foreground, and with that it gave us about 5 hours, which is the average generally given by other devices with this same battery capacity. And the second test was running this drainer in the background while watching YouTube videos in the foreground. In this way, we verified how it manages applications running in the background. And in this case, its management is quite aggressive because it tends to close the apps with high consumption that are running in the background. Although manually you could manage how it behaves, but with this aggressive behavior, it gave me 7.5 hours. So overall, we could say that the battery could become a highlight, although at the same time it can be a bit annoying that your applications are closing if you left exporting something in the background or something similar. To manage the battery, we will also find a simple saving function, but we do not have an ultra saving mode as in other manufacturers. And for charging, you'll find its 44-watt adapter included in the box. In 15 minutes, it recovered 26% in my test. After 30 minutes of starting the charge, it got up to 51%, and the full charge it finished in 68 minutes or so. So I think it charges considerably fast. This could be a strong point, and like any device in this range, we don't expect it to have wireless charging, reversible wireless charging, or anything like that. But with respect to battery protection features, we also don't have any kind of software option like smart charging or charge lock, so the battery will have to be taken care of manually. Don't leave it charging overnight, and for the life of you, don't let it drain to 0%. Now let's talk a little bit about the connectivity of this device that has 4G, and fortunately it does have an option for you to choose which applications can connect to the internet using your mobile data, or if you only want them to connect to the internet using Wi-Fi. And while we're on the subject of Wi-Fi, in this case it simply supports Wi-Fi 5 networks, so it doesn't have as extreme a speed as what we might find on Wi-Fi 6, but in the price range I think it is the norm. Support for Bluetooth networks also falls a bit short. It stays at Bluetooth 5, although again for the price it might be a bit usual, but we would already like to see a bit more recent connectivity. We will not find support for NFC, and that could be a major absence since in the competition you could find some competitors that include it, and serves to make payments by bringing the phone closer to the bank terminals. It does have OTG, although you have to enable it manually to connect any accessories such as USB sticks, and also has a screen projection that is considerably advanced, as it allows you to project only some videos, images, or music, or also project the screen in mirror, but blocking notifications and calls so that they are only seen on the cell phone and not seen in the projection. It also allows you to have the cell phone screen off while the projection continues to save battery. What it can do is project via cable, although you can connect it via cable to Android Auto as well as wirelessly. And with respect to sensors, it does give us a good variety with good support even for the geomagnetic field sensor, which is unusual in the price range. And it also has a good light sensor and a fully physical proximity sensor, so the performance is guaranteed. Now let's talk about the ecosystem, where we honestly won't have something very extensive. In the case of Vivo, they offer us their fully wireless headphones, but currently they don't have a smartwatch, tablet or computer, so they rely entirely on the Android ecosystem, which fortunately is an open ecosystem, so they could easily connect to other brands' devices using technologies like QuickShare or Google FastPay. Vivo doesn't have its own cloud, so it relies on Google's cloud, which gives you 15 gigabytes through Google Drive. And it doesn't have its own ecosystem for home devices either, so you rely on Google Home to control your smart devices. As you'll notice, Vivo still doesn't feel like a very powerful brand in this regard. Let's talk about performance. We found the Snapdragon 680 processor, a fairly common processor in the mid-range, so you can find it in more expensive devices or even in cheaper devices. The advantage of this model is that it comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM, which are also complemented with another 8 gigabytes of virtual RAM, which unfortunately you cannot modify or disable. As you can see, it took 3.9 seconds on average to open each of these applications, practically 4 seconds, so it's not a device that's going to be known for being very fast. In fact, if we scroll through some applications, we may also notice some slight moments of stumbling or small freezes, but overall, it is a device that a good number of people can still find useful. But if you are one of the most demanding who switches between many applications and wants a very fast response, you definitely won't find it here. The performance here is going to be very modest, and for this same price range, you could find much more powerful devices with a more advanced processor. However, the advantage I'm seeing in this model is that despite being a mid-range model, it integrates 8 gigabytes of RAM, which, as I told you a moment ago, if we add the virtual RAM, would be up to 16 gigabytes. And it seems that it is well managed, because at least here in my tests, we are not seeing applications restarting. So it does allow you to keep a lot of applications open without seeing any restarts. But here the only detail is that the processor is not so fast to be moving between all of them. Also, it doesn't support the gesture to quickly switch between applications. So I insist that users who want to be more agile will have a slightly slower experience here. Next, let's export a video with a total duration of 1 minute, joining several clips recorded with this cell phone recorded in full HD to see how long it takes to do this process. Being full HD videos, it is not such a heavy job, and in this case it took almost 40 seconds. I think the performance goes according to the price in this aspect. But what may surprise you is the storage of 256 gigabytes that incorporates, although it is increasingly common in the mid-range we see these capacities. But it is still surprising, although obviously it will not be a super fast storage. But if your priority is to be able to store a lot of photos and videos, this option will definitely be very interesting. Notice how in this case, I still have a lot of storage available despite having 50 gigabytes of data in games. So this device is definitely very good in this aspect, and you can also put a micro SD card up to a terabyte. Finally, let's talk about games, and it is curious that within the iManager is the Ultra Game Mode option because it is not a shortcut as an application. But here is a compilation of the games you have installed, and you can also select whether or not you want a sidebar of additional tools to appear. Plus, you can set up the esports mode that will automatically block calls so that no one is interrupting you, and it will optimize all kinds of device resources. You can also have an enhanced sound experience, although this is the global setting of the system. And finally, it also has an option to prioritize the frame rate per second so that you have the best performance while you're playing games. You can also block notifications and mute calls so that absolutely no one interrupts you. And notice how when I open a game, I can swipe up 3 fingers to quickly open an app so I can respond to a message or something similar without leaving the game. I think that's a pretty cool gesture, but also at the same time it could interfere with some games if you use these kinds of gestures on some content. We also have the sidebar in this part that shows us the CPU and GPU consumption, plus it allows us to enable the boost mode to have the maximum performance available, or also a balanced mode or a mode that gives priority to battery saving. We also have additional tools like the interruption blocks that we had seen a moment ago, but we also have a button that will dim the device's battery while the game is doing some downloading to prevent it from getting to suspend completely. It also has a direct shortcut to WhatsApp, which is very similar to what we already saw a moment ago, and it has screenshot and screen recording options directly from this tool. So it comes with a nice suite of options. In Call of Duty, by default, this device gives us the average quality at an average rate. In this case, we can go up to very high quality, but if we select the graphics rate, we would have to select the lowest graphics quality available. So for our test, we prefer to have the highest graphics quality to make your job a little difficult. In this case, having a Snapdragon processor, it usually has good support for graphics effects, although you can't apply all of them at the same time, but most of them can. And the experience in this case was simply acceptable. That is to say, if you are a demanding gamer, you are definitely going to notice quite a lot of slowness, but if you are a more casual gamer, you could still have a playable experience, although when recording the screen, you will notice that the device still decreases its performance even more. So it doesn't offer us a very advanced graphic compatibility, and it doesn't offer us a very fluid experience when playing. I insist that it will only be acceptable if you are not a very demanding user in this section. But if your priority is gaming, you will definitely find other more powerful things on other devices. Although here the advantage is that it has a very low heating. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to a medium setting up to 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of. And in this case, it seems to be a better optimized game as it performed well, although obviously not free of hiccups. There were some low peaks, but overall I think it did give us a good experience. Remember that generally Snapdragon processors give us a good gaming experience, although this Snapdragon 680 is getting a little bit older. So that's why I insist that it's not going to be a specialized gaming processor in the middle of 2024. In the SpongeBob game, by default, the device gives us a high graphics selection with high quality, which seems a lot for what this device costs. So to be fair, we chose medium resolution with 60 frames per second. Although even going down to that graphics quality, the experience didn't improve. It definitely feels like a simple experience with very little stability, as there were a lot of fluctuations in the frames per second. So we insist that it is not a specialist gaming device, but for casual gamers it could be useful if you like something else about this device or if you just play 2D content. And finally, Henshin Impact seems to be a very difficult test for this device, but we still verified that the default graphics quality is low. But for the test, we went up to medium quality according to the price and went up to 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of. And in this case, it has to be said that there were not that many fluctuations between frames per second. However, the average was quite low, so let's say it remains stable but in low numbers. So it's not a fully playable experience. The experience is bad because you don't feel agile movements. The screen responds a bit slow, and when recording the screen, even the performance is further reduced. So for this price, the Snapdragon 680 is definitely not going to be that recommendable if your priority is gaming. So for the moment, this has been all for this video review. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can tell us, and we'll see you next time.